Into the Lonely Woods, Blessings and Messages for Times of Solitude and Isolation by Lucy Cavendish. Artwork by Dan May. Book dedication. For all the lonesome travelers. With many thanks to Dan May, working with your art has been a healing in itself. Just gazing upon the beauty and poignancy has helped me on my path. Thank you. And to Tony Carmine Salerno for the gift of opportunity once again. Hermann Hesse states, quote, "We must become so alone, so utterly alone, that we withdraw into our innermost self. It is a way of bitter suffering, but then our solitude is overcome, and we are no longer alone, for we find that our innermost self is the Spirit, that it is God, the indivisible. And suddenly we find ourselves in the midst of the world, yet undisturbed by its multiplicity. For our innermost soul, we know ourselves to be one with all being." End quote. Introduction. Welcome to the woods. Your completeness does not depend on the presence of others. In many ways, our culture teaches us to have family, have friends, be sociable, and go to gatherings, parties, festivals, shopping centers, and malls, all where we cannot be alone. There is no quiet, there is no nature, there is only the fullness and whirl of sound and experience and sensation, until we find that we must be alone. We forget who we are amidst incessant noise, and perhaps for some of us, we never ever had the chance to know who we could be when we were able to simply be without others. Being alone can take courage. In solitude, we have the capacity to strengthen our minds, to depend on ourselves. We can develop ideas and theories, be creative, and even, at times, ascendant, and allow genius to flow through us. If we truly care for ourselves, if we truly love our own selves, being in our own company will be valued. We will relish our alone times alone. We will make the very most of them and expand into the space vacated by sound and noise and bustle and demands and even love, and find a way back to our own selves. We tend to think of the word alone as negative, sad, even dangerous. And that is truthful in part. To be alone is to be vulnerable in many ways. There is a cost to relentless company, though. It can make us vulnerable to pleasing others, to valuing others more than ourselves, to trying desperately to please them, for we come to depend on others for a sense of self-worth. Nikola Tesla says, quote, "The mind is sharper and keener in seclusion and uninterrupted solitude. No big laboratory is needed in which to think. Originality thrives in seclusion free of outside influences beating upon us to cripple the creative mind. Be alone. That is the secret of invention. Be alone. That is when ideas are born. That is why many of the earthly miracles have had their genesis in humble surroundings." End quote. Solitude is different. Solitude can be glorious, sublime, soulful, and connected. It can be ecstatic. Revelations come, flashes of understanding, and true kinship with the world and with your own soul develops. I adore solitude, and I have often been very lonely. I have spent times in my life feeling so separated from others, feeling alone when surrounded, spending a time meant for family and friends alone. seeking aloneness in order to heal, feeling the joy of being alone, but the pain of being misunderstood or an outcast is very different, and I have felt these too. Virginia Woolf says, quote, I need solitude. I need space. I need air. I need the empty fields round me and my legs pounding along roads and sleep and animal existence. End quote. Humans, whether star being, fey being, mer being, and so on, we crave the village, the tribe, the community. How long has it been since you said hello to yourself? How long has it been since you reassured yourself that being alone is not to be forsaken or abandoned, but to be in the midst of what we all need to connect even more deeply with all of creation? If it has been too long, this deck is your guide to welcoming yourself home, to find the gifts and the beauty and ultimately the joys of solitude. If you can be with yourself when you are alone, without need for distraction or the anxiety that comes from aloneness, you will meet your true self. You will come to be content with yourself and your evolution, even as you strive to become and to change. In the isolation that is often mistaken for some kind of flaw or fault, you will come to know that you are divine. This knowledge is healing in itself, and then you will come to know yourself within the bliss of every single day. I am rarely lonely when I am alone, but it was not always like that for me. I have often felt most lonely when amongst people who seemed not to see or feel who I was. I felt cast in their projections of who I should be, a butterfly caught in a spider web, unable to free myself from the expectation and standards that I felt no connection with. There isn't another soul on this planet like you or like me, because there is no one else quite like you. This knowledge can free you to become even closer to becoming yourself, a most sacred of tasks. And this is why time out of time and time in the aloneness, the all oneness, is to be so treasured. It is a time when you can fill into the peace and gifts of solitude that do not separate you, nor do they make you vulnerable. They can free you. For me, seclusion is an opportunity to recover my true heart's desire. How can I know what I truly want when all those about me tell me their ideas of me? When there is time alone, or even far from the same language or places, there in the stillness, my inner voice emerges, and this voice is filled with the love of my soul for myself. Yet it bears repeating. It is an inescapable truth that deep within all of us is a need to find others who are like ourselves. One of your quests throughout this lifetime has most likely been to weave connection and kinship. Many who walk the path of the Spirit are not always completely at home within their blood families. Therefore, we seek others, soul kin, who can become that family. Krishnamurti says, quote, we carry about us the burden of what thousands of people have said and the memories of all our misfortunes. To abandon all that totally is to be alone, and the mind that is alone is not only innocent, but young, not in time or age, but young, innocent, alive at whatever age, and only such a mind can see that which is truth and that which is not measurable by words. End quote. The sense of being apart can come from displacement or trauma, or a feeling of never quite fitting in. We think this makes us strange or different, but most of us will go through a time when we feel, and perhaps literally are, physically alone. Consider the factors that physically separate us from those we love, even those we have grown accustomed to through habit. That separation can leave us feeling very alone, very small, in a large and uncaring world. Yet the universe recognizes you as its dear child. The omniscient, jeweled, faceted multiplicity of the universe's energy knows you through your mishaps, bewildered attempts at self-discovery, and the hampered bonds. To ease the aloneness, the universe has provided a witness for you, whose mission it is to accompany you every moment of this lifetime and beyond. They will watch over you as you travel the space between lives, where we decide the purpose of our next incarnation. These witnesses and the universe will send you messages, guides, and companions, especially in those moments that feel like pure isolation. The discovery of soul family. In today's world, community is very different from what we evolved to experience. We have evolved to connect with an extended family, to share loads not taken on by individuals. We work too hard under lights that sap our energy. We are not out in nature. We are not cold or hot or windswept or with our kin. We do not have our initiations, and we do not know who we are in relation to others. The seeking of wisdom often meant finding teachers from an elder within a clan. At other times, we came by this wisdom within the solitude of nature. We journeyed deep within the woods or made our home alone on islands surrounded by sea. We communed deeply with the pure essence of nature and of our true selves. Saints and mystics did this. Jesus did this. We wandered far and we wandered alone, and we learned to survive, even thrive, on very little. When I was young, I did this in a very modern way. I separated myself from those who knew me, who knew a version of me, to become who I could be. I did not know what that could truly be. This deck is your journey into that pilgrimage. It is also a solace for when the time of being alone feels painful, or when you feel lost or rejected, or when there is never a place in which the comfort of being seen clearly without explanation can be done. Just to be, just to listen and learn from the world. Henry David Thoreau says, quote, "You think that I am impoverishing myself, withdrawing from men, but in my solitude I have woven for myself a silken web or chrysalis, and nymph-like shall ere long burst forth a more perfect creature, fitted for higher society." End quote. Isolation as punishment. Solitude is a different experience to isolation, or feeling misunderstood or rejected and cast away. Solitude feels like a place where we choose the company of our soul, often to know it better. We often create that solitude in ways great and humble. Hermits dwell deep in the communion of the forest and trees. Jesus went into the desert to discover what God would ask of him. For many urban dwellers, silent retreat, or Vipassana beckons as a way to quieten the mind and reconnect with our inner selves. We do this because we need solitude. We hunger for the gifts of solitude, but we fear isolation. We are ashamed of our loneliness. We must sometimes be alone when we most crave companionship. We cannot help but be rejected at other times, despite all we do to create and maintain a connection. Whenever I have been alone, my emotional response is complex and multi-hued. If I choose seclusion after a time of high demand, it is relieving and restorative. And I felt healed after times of deep engagement and connection to become only myself again for a while, to meet no needs but my own, something so few of us can experience regularly, and yet the soul requires this. Lord Byron says, quote, "Then stirs the feeling infinite, so felt in solitude, where we are least alone," end quote. Solitary witches. There have long been magical people who have sought solitude to work more deeply with the source of their wisdom and magics. Solitary witches are those who tend to do their work alone, perhaps taught or mentored by a wise one, but who in time practices alone. This does not mean they do not practice on behalf of others. Many witches in the past were often separated from communities and yet a part of them. Before the demonization of witches by the church, women and men who were wise in the ways of herb lore, birthing and death rites, the mending of wounds, star crafting, the use of blessings, and the power of a magical familiar tended to work alone. This was partly for safety and partly for pleasure. At other times, we witches worked with others, in communities or covens of wise ones who were dedicated to the service of their people. But for many witches and magical ones, there is nearly always a craving for the solitude that gives us the space to learn more deeply and to hear the voices of nature and connect with her more deeply. Every one of us can learn a great deal when we are with other people. Witches, too, learn in covens, which can become close as family. Voodoo practitioners work within houses, which again are like families. Even if we do this and have that well of nourishment and companionship to draw from, we are often most inspired in a spontaneous, surprising way when we are alone. There are so many blessings to times of solitude, but our culture does not want us to feel this. It wants us to depend on the family we create with work or small wounded families, so we become ever more dependent upon governments and institutions. We have lost our villages, our families are small and easily broken, and in a disposable society, friendship can seem transient. It is wise for us all to develop the sense that time alone is time very well spent. This will give us solace, offer great resilience, and create a sense of connection that no longer relies upon being with others. That does not mean we cannot have our kin or our family of people. It simply means that if we must walk alone for a time, we will find a way to do this, come to know who we are, and make this time valuable, enriching, and even joyous for ourselves. And this is what this deck is for. The moments when you feel lost, alone, or misunderstood, when you feel lonely, a little abandoned, or unsure of how to work with or what to make of the time while you are alone. Turn to this deck as your ally. Take your cards and bring one forth to speak with you, or offer yourself a reading with 3 cards, 9 cards, or 10 cards. Within that one card or spread, there will be a sweet sign, a moment that is there to bring you back to the truth of how precious and beloved you are. While it is true that humans often experience intense loneliness, you are never truly alone. Sylvia Plath says, quote, "Now I know what loneliness is, I think. Momentary loneliness, anyway. It comes from a vague core of the self, like a disease of the blood, dispersed throughout the body so that one cannot locate the matrix, the spot of contagion." End quote.